Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's discussion with Jan Marini, speaking about rejuvenation. This is the second conversation in a series of 3. For those of you who are able to make it on Monday, a talk about acne. Today is rejuvenation, and on Friday, we'll have a discussion focused on hyperpigmentation. A quick touch on just what we're talking about and what is achievable for rejuvenation. And again, we'll go into the details behind everything, but whether that be texture, fine lines and wrinkles, skin reflectivity, brightness, glow, there are a lot of different terms, there are a lot of different details, but quite a few things can be addressed with professional products, and they address different specific concerns. This is also something that no matter what your direct concerns are, wrinkles around the eye, under eye, just texture of the skin, any and all skin types, there are solutions that work very well for the rejuvenation, in the rejuvenation category. Also, we have solutions looking at not just face, but if you're interested in things off face, whether that be the neck, and here you can see the depth of lines and wrinkles, also some of the sagging skin under the neck. There are things that you can help in addressing that. Hands and rejuvenation options that are available there as well. So there's a lot that we can look at. I want to give a quick introduction for those of you who are familiar with the company, to introduce you to Jan Marini herself. Jan is the founder of Jan Marini Skin Research. She founded the company to this month, 26 years ago. And, you know, having been in the aesthetic industry myself for 20 plus years now, truly has set up an impressive company with an assortment of solutions that are second to none. And it comes from innovations and a desire to achieve an end goal in a way that nobody else had or has, and continues that track record of innovation. In fact, just in December of 2019, and you can see here, January 8th, 2020. So right at the end of 2019, New Beauty Magazine came out with a list of the top 20 innovators in the aesthetic industry of all time. And Jan was actually one of the top 20 innovators recognized for innovations in the aesthetic space, as she has historically and continues to lead the industry. I'll pass it over to Jan, and my final statement is, having worked with her for nearly 10 years now, she is a fountain of information. Please do make use of the questions and be able to answer your questions, your concerns, your curiosities. Truly is a remarkably knowledgeable and valuable asset to the company, but also excited to introduce her to all of you. So, Jan, I would like to introduce you.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody. I am very excited to be here. I've so much looked forward to this. It's really a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to emphasize that I would like this to be interactive. As I go through the discussion, if you've got questions, please put them in the chat box. And when I get to the point where I'm going to take a few questions, feel free to unmute yourself. And also, you've given me some questions in advance. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I'm going to start off and I'm going to talk a little bit about my background. And then I'm going to get into some information on how the skin ages. And then I'm going to get into some product discussion. So I've been a product researcher now for well over 40 years. And back in the early days, my expertise was in the area of ingredients. You know, when you pick up a skincare product and you look at that ingredient listing, and it's mysterious and complicated, and how do you know if something is really going to have an effect on your fine lines and wrinkles? Is it really going to help your discoloration? Is it going to make your acne better or worse? Is it going to help your rosacea? And I did a lot of lecturing to physicians, medical professionals, skincare professionals, a lot of radio and television. It lends itself really well to talk shows, and people love to hear about ingredients and what works and what doesn't work. And as time went on, I began to develop associations with physicians and researchers literally all over the world. I really started to focus on uncovering and identifying breakthrough technologies. Now, I always qualify the word breakthrough because anytime a product comes to the marketplace, isn't it always a breakthrough product? And so when I use the term breakthrough, what I'm really talking about, these were things that weren't in the marketplace. Now, back in the early to mid 80s, I was a glycolic acid pioneer, and glycolic acid didn't exist commercially. You couldn't walk into a department store or a drugstore and find a glycolic acid product. Now, you could get it for cleaning stains off your driveway and grease out of car engines. Around 1989, going into 1990, I actually financed and brought to market two companies, two product lines, and I'm going back a lot of years, but you may remember these, MD Formulations and MD Forte. It was unique for several reasons. One, it was really the first commercial glycolic acid line. And secondly, I made a decision that initially we were going to sell only through physician offices. Now, this is my fourth company, and this was the most difficult time ever in my career because physicians didn't dispense products. And they were so offended, so incensed at the suggestion that someone would say, sell what they said, cosmetics out of their office. And of course now that's the rest is history because everyone does that. But it was unique for another reason, because for the first time, a pharmaceutical giant, in this case Allergan, purchased a skincare company in the professional market. And that was back in July of 1994. And so literally on July 1st, 1994, took down the MD Formulation sign and put up the Marini sign. And as Stuart said, that was 26 years ago. And so here we are today. And you know, when I talk to the media, I can always predict that they're going to ask me at least two questions, the same two questions every time. One is, do I use my own products? Which I think is kind of silly. Yes, I do. And the second one is, what is it that motivates me? What is it that inspires me? Why do I do all the research and development and read all the medical journals? And I give the same answer every single time. I'm selfish. I do it for me. I don't want adult acne. I don't want discoloration. I don't want rosacea. I'd hopefully like to stave off fine lines and wrinkles as long as possible. I'd like to have, you know, relatively healthy, young-looking, glowing skin as long as possible. And I don't think I'm different from anyone else. You know, the average female has over $600 in product in her bathroom that she doesn't use. And I always say, I don't need another product. I need solutions. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about solutions. Now, I'm going to give you just a little bit of basis on how the skin ages. And that's such a complex subject. And we could spend days talking just about that. But I'm going to take it down to a very, very simplistic level so that you kind of have something that you can relate to as we go along in this discussion. So essentially, in terms of how we look at our skin or our face, it ages in a couple of different ways. Now, when you touch the outside layer of your skin, you're touching what's known as the stratum corneum. It's a dead layer. You said about 500 million cells a day. They're microscopic. You're not aware of it. Now, as you get older, that dead layer thickens, and it's actually known medically as increased corneocyte cohesion, but it thickens. And these cells on the outside of the skin should be laying in a very cohesive, very even manner, kind of like shingles on a roof or fish scales. And what they do is they pile up and they get disorganized. And so your skin looks thicker, it looks coarser, it doesn't have that same reflective, radiant glow. Your pores may look larger, you start to see, you know, fine lines, you start to see that the skin isn't as uniform as it once was. And there's certain substances between these cells. These are moisturizing substances, and they're substances that give the skin volume. And they're things like glycosaminoglycans, ceramides, phospholipids, hyaluronic acid. And so they make the skin kind of help to add that moisture content. They give skin barrier function so that it responds appropriately under different conditions. Whether you're in really humid weather, whether you're in dry weather, cold, hot, your skin responds appropriately. And so again, as we age, we have fewer of these substances and that outer layer thickens. To give you an example, let's say you wash your face and it feels kind of nice and soft and moist afterwards. Don't put anything on it. Wait about 20 minutes and all of a sudden it's all tight and dry. That's known as increased corneocyte cohesion. And it's where the skin literally, it hardens and it cornifies. And when we put a moisturizer on, what we're doing is we're wetting down that dead layer and we temporarily make it feel better and we temporarily help to prevent moisture loss, but we've done nothing to address the issue. Now, the dermis is 80% collagen. And as we age, the dermis thins. So this part thickens, the dermis thins. When you get into your 60s, you can have lost as much as 60% or more of your collagen. And eventually kind of everything collapses and that doesn't look good. So what you want is you want a nice, thin, compact stratum corneum. And you want a nice, thick dermis. And people say to me, but Jan, if I use glycolic and I use retinoids, aren't I going to thin my skin? And I have kind of a sarcastic answer. I say, I hope so, because you want a very thin, compact stratum corneum that gives you the most youthful looking, glowing, radiant skin that's most uniform, and you want a nice, thick dermis. Now, I do lots and lots of consultations. I do lots of consultations with celebrities. I can't tell you, it's confidential who the majority of them are, but I can tell you one I've worked with for years, and that's Cher. I do lots of consultations with people that own major companies in the US, again, confidential, but one of them, I'm probably just about everybody on this call has one of their undergarments. And I do lots of consultations with physicians in the US. I'm literally all over the world. They carry the product, they want to talk technology, they want a consultation. And I don't care how sophisticated someone is. I don't care how educated they are. I ask the same question every single time. I start off exactly the same way. And I want you to ask this question of yourself. If there was something you could change or improve about your skin, what would it be? Now, I have never had anybody say to me, you know, Jan, my skin is perfect. It's absolutely flawless. I get up in the morning and I look in the mirror and I say, you must have been walking the red carpet all night. Your skin is absolutely perfect. Everyone always gives me something that they're concerned with. Maybe it's that they break out. Maybe they have large pores. It's fine lines. It's discoloration. It's any number of things. And then I typically ask, what else would you like to change or improve? And I'm going to usually hear 3 or 4 different things that individuals want to address. That's your runway. If you're selecting product because it's not specific to that runway, it doesn't have validation that's actually going to address discoloration or address the size of the appearance of your follicles or your fine lines, then you might as well put it on the shelf with the other $600 in product that you don't use. So I'm going to talk about the skincare management system. And the skincare management system is the basis of the starting point for everyone. I don't care, again, how educated, how sophisticated people have access to the most expensive products in the world, the most expensive services, technologies. Everyone starts at that point. And one of the questions that I get asked, but Jan, how could we all be on the same system and have different concerns? Well, I'm going to get into the system and just briefly talk about each product, but I'm going to take one product out of order to give you an example of how that's possible. One of the products in the system is called Bioclear, and some of you may be familiar with Bioclear. Bioclear is a combination of glycolic, salicylic, and azelaic acid. Azelaic acid is sold by prescription for rosacea. It's sold by prescription for acne. It's also one of the best resurfacing agents I've ever seen for the appearance of the size of your pores, just making the skin look more resurfaced, the appearance of fine lines, and it brightens the skin. At one time, high percentages of azelaic acid were even used by physicians for areas where there was stubborn pigment as a pigment lifting agent. Okay, then we have glycolic acid. Now, of all of the skincare ingredients in the world, you took everything in the world, there are two that have been studied medically more than any other. And when I say medically, I mean histological studies, biopsies, I mean actual medical studies. Two, one are retinoids and one is glycolic acid. As a matter of fact, back around 1992, when glycolic acid was just really huge in the medical community. It still is, but it was fairly new at that time, getting lots and lots of attention. There was a medical conference in Florida called Update on Alpha Hydroxy Acids, 3 days long. All they did for 3 days was talk about glycolic acid, how it works for ichthyosis, how it works for psoriasis, how it can work for acne, how it works for the appearance of acne scarring, how it works for discoloration, how it works for post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. I can go on and on and on. But at the very simplest level, what glycolic acid does is it dissolves and dislodges the glue-like substance or cellular cement between cells. So on the surface of the skin, it causes them to lift off. And it does this without being abrasive. It does this without having inflammation. And so it makes the skin look very resurfaced, very smooth. It helps with the appearance of fine lines and wrinkles. It brightens the skin, pore size. And also in the follicle, because it has such a small molecular weight, it can actually get into the follicle. It dissolves and dislodges the glue-like substance or cellular cement between cells, which is the beginning of the acne process. Also, when you have what you refer to maybe as clogged follicles or blackheads, which cause the follicle to dilate, it actually allows that retentive material to dissipate. It helps to resolve it. So the follicle relaxes. It appears to be much, much smaller, much more refined. Now, glycolic acid, interestingly enough, technically is categorized as a moisturizer. Why is that? Because it actually stimulates those substances that I mentioned, mucopolysaccharides, ceramides, phospholipids, hyaluronic acid. And so it gives the skin volume, and it actually gives the skin more moisture. So again, we could go on and on, but my point being is, this is one of the reasons that we could all be on the same system, but have different concerns. And by the way, glycolic acid is also a staple in the physician's toolbox for rosacea. Okay, so then I get asked, but Jan, why are there 5 products? Well, there's actually 3 products. It's a cleanser, a sunscreen, and 3 products. But why are there 5 products? Well, several reasons. One, it's very popular today from a marketing perspective for companies to talk about putting everything in one product. And it sounds so seductive. You know, it's got glycolic in it, and it has retinoids in it, it has lipoic acid, and it has all of these different ingredients. And you just need one product. That is not possible. And there's a number of reasons why. First of all, when I'm going to formulate a product, I have 100% from a statistical standpoint to deal with. I don't have 110 or 150. In any product, generally the first 50% is water. Maybe could be a little more than 50%. Depends on the texture of the product and other factors. You can't bake a cake without liquid. So then I've got to put in my binders, and I have to put in stabilizers. You don't want to open up a jar of product and it's just nothing but a separated mess. I have to put in spreading agents. So even an oil-free product, you have to have something that allows it to spread elegantly on the skin. And preservatives and all of the other, you know, the emolliency, the other things that I'm going to put in. Now I'm going to put in my actives. Now what if I need 12% of something, and maybe a 3% and a 5%, and another percentage? Well, guess what? I just ran out of room, but that's okay. Because what I'll do is, I'll put in much smaller percentages. It looks good on the label. You're going to see it. It's there. It's going to be impressive. You'll be impressed. And I'll charge just as much, maybe even more. But it's just not going to have the effect. And the other reason it's not going to have the effect is because there's some very complex formulary restrictions in terms of what ingredients work together. I'll give you an example. For glycolic acid to do what I was discussing momentarily ago, it has to be at a pH for home care use of right around 3.25. Retinol has to be at a pH of around 5. Lipid-soluble C needs to be at a pH around 6 or so. And it could go on and on. So when you put these in the same formula, they render each other inactive, are far less effective. And then you get into the manufacturing complexities, and some things have to have high speed, low speed, heat, cold, and I can go on and on. So what we have is something called layered technology. And by separating out these technologies into separate products, we're able to really focus on what it is we want to accomplish, and we're able to maintain efficacy, the highest efficacy. So the first product in the system is the Bioglycolic facial cleanser. And you take an amount about the size of a quarter, and you put it all over your face. I work it around really, really well, and you put it on dry skin. People always say, but Jan, why dry skin? If you put oil on the back of your hand and then drop water on top of it, it just beads up. So I want it to be in direct contact with makeup, with oil, with debris. And again, you work it around really well, and then you can use all the water you want. What I recommend is that you take a washcloth, wring it out, and use the washcloth to gently remove it, but you can kind of buff the skin at the same time, and it removes dead cells. And one of the responses that we hear all the time is even just using the cleanser, you notice a big difference right away. Now, one other thing I want to mention, this is the most gentle cleanser I make. And it's in a base that's very similar to a drugstore product that doctors love. It's called Cetaphil. And doctors recommend Cetaphil for people that are very reactive and sometimes that can't even tolerate water because it's so neutral. So it's in a base is similar to that. But even more than that, you can use, and I make non-glycolic acid cleansers, you can use the best cleanser in the world, and I don't care if it's micellar water, whatever anybody tells you. They can't get into the follicle. The molecule is too large. Glycolic acid actually can get into the follicle, dissolves and dislodges, glue-like substance, cellular cement, helps to get rid of that cellular retention. So it helps with acne. It helps with making the follicle appear much smaller, the skin look much more refined, much smoother, much more reflective. Okay, then the next product is something called Siesta Serum. Now, Siesta Serum is fair to say, people refer to it as a vitamin C serum. That's fair to say. And we've all heard of vitamin C. One of the reasons why vitamin C has gotten a lot of medical attention, and one of the reasons why it's an important topical agent, is because without vitamin C, we can't make collagen. If you don't have it in your diet, you can't make collagen. You know, back in the 15th, 16th, 17th century, when people would go to sea, particularly if they were in the Navy, for long periods of time, and they didn't have access to fresh foods with vitamin C, scurvy was an epidemic. So we need vitamin C, but we also know that if we can get it into the skin topically, if the skin can recognize it, that it is tremendously helpful in terms of anti-aging. The most common recognizable form of vitamin C is ascorbic acid. What I'm going to tell you, and if you don't have to believe me, you can talk to an independent chemist or somebody at a university, is ascorbic acid is not stable. So when ascorbic acid is exposed to oxygen, it's exposed to sunlight, all the different kinds of conditions that you're going to have in your bathroom, it begins to very rapidly break down. And over the years, I've had lots of different products tested. and they lose efficacy very, very quickly. So what we work with is a lipid-soluble form of C, commonly known as ascorbyl palmitate, chemically L-ascorbic acid 6-palmitate, or lipid-soluble C, and it has a 2-year shelf life. It's completely exposed to oxygen, exposed to water, it's exposed to all of the various kinds of, again, issues that you're going to have in your bathroom. It is stable. And I could go on and on about the studies that have been done on this and how it is at the forbulastin-induced tumor studies, the studies that done by Olga Markle and Sloan Kettering having to do with in vivo and vitro, and how it stimulates more collagen than ascorbic acid, and we could spend a lot of time on that. And you can go onto Medline and you can see huge numbers of articles on ascorbyl palmitate, both internal, external. Okay, but let's just say that we took the vitamin C out of the product. It's gone. It would still be extraordinary. And the reason is because there's an ingredient called Dmae, which stands for dimethylaminoethanol. Dmae is a precursor to acetylcholine. Now, acetylcholine is a major chemical messenger your brain produces. And one of the things that acetylcholine does is that every nerve in your body sparks acetylcholine into your muscles. And it causes what's known as correct anatomical muscle positioning. You know, you could refer to it as muscle tone. Even your facial nerve sparks acetylcholine into the muscle, and it has an effect on helping to keep the face contoured and your cheek pads nice and high. It's not the entire answer to the aging process by any means. It's one little small piece. But as we age, you know, whether you produce less acetylcholine, maybe your receptor sites don't pick it up the same way, the muscle tone changes. And, you know, I always say, you can exercise like a fiend when you're 60, and you're not going to have the same muscle tone that you did when you were 40 or 30 or 25. Now, I'm going to tell you about a study that was presented at the American Academy of Dermatology. This was a half-face, double-blind, random placebo study. So this is an actual study. And what they did is, the individuals in the study did not know which side of the face that they were putting. Somebody needs to unmute. The individuals in the study didn't know whether they were putting it on, which side they were putting the placebo on or the product on, but the side with the product that they put it on, it was noted that the jawline looked firmer, cheek pad looked a little bit higher, nasolabial fold more pulled back, sometimes one eyebrow higher than the other, neck looked bigger, neck looked better. And what they determined, though, that was interesting is that the effect is persistent. Now, what does that mean? Well, a lot of times you see products in the marketplace that are advertised as being firming products and making the skin look more lifted. And typically, they use, to one degree or another, something called film formers. And some are more sophisticated than others, but a film former is something that you put on the skin, and it kind of, as it dries, as you smooth it out, it sort of tightens and compresses and makes the skin temporarily look better. Now, a good example of that, and every time I turn the TV on, I hear this, ad nauseum, I hear this advertised, Plexiderm. How many of you have heard of Plexiderm? And they put it on the face, and they put it underneath bags, and bags disappear. Well, what's happening is that, again, it's a film former, and it puts just enough tension on the skin that it makes it look better temporarily. Now, how long does that last? Well, I don't know, 4 hours, 6 hours, maybe 8 hours at the most, but I can guarantee you eventually the bag pops back out. And when you wash your face, it's completely gone. So this is something very different. When they determined the effect is persistent, what they found out is that if somebody uses this, let's say you use it for 3 months or 6 months, and then for some reason you stop using it, that the skin simply ages back. You don't wash it off and it's gone. It's persistent. Okay. Then in the next is the Bioclear, and we talked about Bioclear. So I'm going to move from Bioclear and I'm going to go to hydration. Now, hydration is a term that everybody recognizes, hydration, moisturization, and I use that term because it's familiar, but it's really a vehicle for more technology. Now, also, the term moisturizer is really, if you look at the actual definition from a chemistry standpoint, it is some type of oil, grease, or emolliency that you put on the skin and it keeps water from evaporating. That's the definition of a moisturizer. And I'll give you an example. And it doesn't matter necessarily how expensive the product is. You know, some products have a few more sophisticated ingredients, but typically, whether you're spending $10 or whether you're spending, in some cases, $500, that's the basis. And I'll give you an example, and not to be derogatory, but this is just, I'm just giving you a real direct example. So most of you have heard of the product Creme De La Mer. And Creme De La Mer is I think it's $125 or $150 for an ounce. And I go back years with Creme De La Mer. So Creme De La Mer was invented by Max Huber, who was a scientist who supposedly burned himself in the lab, and then he came up with this concoction, and he put it on his burns, and it helped his burns to heal, but it also made his skin look younger. And so years ago, Max wanted to get Creme De La Mer into department stores, which is very difficult to do. And he had spent a lot of money, he had a lot of inventory, and he was getting frustrated and he needed to monetize his inventory. And so he decided that he was going to sell it to somebody that he knew. Her name was Betty Franklin. Betty Franklin, back then, was the beauty editor for Prevention magazine. Now she's long gone because she was, I think she was 80 years old back then. And Betty had a mail order business out of her home where she sold skincare products. And Max eventually got into department stores. His first one, and it was another story, and it was almost by accident, was called I Magnum, which is no longer around anymore. But anyway, meanwhile, Betty is selling this product, and it wasn't called Creme De La Mer. It was like an English translation of like Fruit of the Sea. And I still have one of the original jars. And Betty was selling it for $25 a jar. And so if you look at the ingredient listing, first ingredient is water, to be expected, and then you get into sort of mineral oil and petrolatum, which is a great ingredient for occluding the skin and keeping water from evaporating. It's not my favorite ingredient, but that's one of the primary ingredients in there. Then you have some sunflower oil, and you have some algae and some other types of oils and emollients and binders, etc. There's nothing else magical in the product. It's a moisturizer. So when I talk about moisturizing, I'm talking about something very different. So I'm talking about something that, yes, it can is sophisticated in terms of how it helps to maintain moisture balance in the skin, but it's a vehicle for product. And I'll talk about just a couple of the ingredients in our transformation product. So first of all, transferrin growth factor beta-1. Now transferrin growth factor beta-1 was getting lots of attention quite a few years ago. And I was doing a lot of research into this. And I was following research in particular by Dr. Guido of Jefferson University. And Dr. Guido was interviewed, and he was quoted as saying, this is just the thing to keep the skin young indefinitely. Well, that got my attention. And what he determined that it appears to stimulate a type of collagen you don't produce after the age of 30. Secondly, we have something called Thymus and Beta4. Now, this is actually our own patent. So Thymus and Beta4 actually was discovered in the thymus of cattle, but it's in every cell in your body except red blood cells. And it's believed to be able to correct instructions coming from your DNA. Now, not to get too complicated, it's another small piece of the aging puzzle. Your genes are made up of DNA. Some of your genes are expressive genes, and they're referred to as expressive genes because they express instructions. And they send out instructions, and these instructions are delivered by RNA, and they're the only instructions that your body listens to. You break a bone, you have an illness, you are repairing a sunburn. It's the only instructions that your body listens to. Now, as we age, those instructions become compromised. And again, it's a lot more complicated than this, but what happens is we don't repair the same way. We don't respond the same way. You're not going to repair the same way when you're 30 that you did at 5. You're not going to repair the same way at 60 that you did at 30. And eventually, sadly, you just stop repairing it all. It's believed to be able to correct some of those instructions coming from your DNA. And then finally, sunscreen. Now, I'm passionate about sunscreen. Sunscreen is not a cosmetic, just a cosmetic issue. It is a health issue. And today, the statistics are that at least 1 out of 50 individuals will be diagnosed with malignant melanoma. It's fatal up to 50% of the time. And there's basal cell carcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma, and that sometimes can be burned off and easily treated, but oftentimes require considerable surgery. And in some cases, while it's less likely, if squamous cell carcinoma is left untreated, it can actually metastasize and people can actually die of it. So this really is a health issue. And every so often, I have people say to me, but Jan, I don't care about fine lines and wrinkles. I don't like sunscreen, and I don't care. I think they're marks of character, and I don't care if I get all kinds of discoloration, and I don't care if it exacerbates my acne. I love acne. Give me more acne, 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 acne. It is truly a health issue. And when I was born and raised in Southern California, in San Diego, and I loved going to the beach. I spent as much time at the beach as I possibly could every summer, and even in between if I get to the beach. And we had sort of our suntan manual, and that was that first of all, you started out with a really good burn, and that was your base coat kind of, and you allowed that to turn into a tan, and then you maintained it and deepened it with baby oil and iodine and cocoa butter. So I did horrible things to my skin. And when I was 24, I made a decision that I was not going to sunbathe any longer, and I was going to wear sunscreen every single day. And I have kept my word. I've never gone a day since then without sunscreen. I'm going to be 69 in December. But I have to tell you, it was really hard to maintain that because I hated how most sunscreens felt. I hated how they felt. And I really spent a huge amount of money trying to find something that was elegant and then didn't make me feel that I was going to break out. Even if it didn't make me break out, it made me feel, sometimes sunscreens did make me break out. So when I developed the SPF 33 antioxidant daily face protectant, I really had that acutely in mind. And statistically, only 1/3 of Americans wear sunscreens consistently. And sometimes the numbers drop. And why is that? Because we're not stupid. We know it's important. And you can hear people talk about all these different sort of esoteric things as the reason why, but when it comes down to it, if you peel away the layers and you really get down to the real reason, it's because they don't like how they feel. So when I developed SPF 33 antioxidant daily face protectant, one of the reasons it's become a cult favorite is because your skin actually feels better with it on than without it. And if I'm going to be indoors all day long, I still have it on because my skin looks and feels better with it than it does without it. One of the things that it has a selective oil capture system. Now, let's suppose that you have really, really oily skin, or maybe you have combination oily, or maybe you're just oily some places in the summertime occasionally. It has a virtually unlimited capacity to absorb oil, but it can't absorb actives and it can't absorb water. And if your skin is normal or dry, it leaves it soft, it leaves it silky, it leaves it glowing. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the reasons why this is such an incredibly favorite product, cult favorite. So when I do consultations, one of the things that I always do when I get to the point in the consultation after I've asked lots of questions and we've discussed concerns, and I talk about putting people on the skincare management system. Again, that's a starting point for everyone. I always say to them, I'm going to continue to work with you. And seasons change, your skin changes, we may modify your program. you've got this runway of things that we want to address. And so there are so many things that we can do, take the skin to a higher level. I always say that if 30 days from now you tell me your skin is the best it's ever been, I can get it to a higher level of skin rejuvenation, and I can. And so, as Stuart mentioned in the beginning, there are things that are for discoloration. We have products that are for helping to create more volume in the skin. We have products for the redness associated with rosacea. We have other anti-aging products. We have products for the neck. We have products for the hand, and I can go on and on. But I'm going to stop here and see if we have any questions in the chat box. Stuart?
All right. Thank you, Jan, and thank you for the information and background on all of those things. We definitely have had a number of questions, excuse me, questions entered already. But on top of that, we have a bunch of people who sent in questions to begin prior to the call. So I want to get to a couple of those. The first question here was a question around aging post-menopause. Mm-hmm. So if you're speaking with somebody who is post-menopause and changes they have observed to their skin, what are common things that you'd recommend to assist?
Okay. Well, first of all, and really, without talking specifically to that individual, sometimes postmenopause can mean, well, I have acne. Sometimes postmenopause means, you know, I looked in the mirror one day and it looked like somebody let the air out of my face. It can mean that they think their skin is dry. They think their skin is oily. It's fine lines, wrinkles, and discoloration. So again, regardless, the starting point is skincare management, which addresses a huge number of those concerns. And postmenopausal women, no different than anyone else, your outer layer of your skin is going to get thicker and coarser, and the dermis gets thinner. And one thing I want to mention, when you look in the mirror and you start to see fine lines and you start to see maybe discoloration and larger pores and all that, and you say, well, you know, that's just going to happen to everyone. It's inevitable. Everybody gets older. What I want you to know is that most of that damage was programmed into your skin before the age of 10, at least 50% before the age of 20. It takes 10, 20, 30, 40 years to show up. So what you're doing is, you're doing what you can to hopefully reverse the appearance of that damage significantly. And things that can be added to the program, like retinoids, which are the gold standard for that. And there's so many things that a person can do to really transform their skin. So whether you are premenopausal, postmenopausal, wherever you are in the spectrum, we can address all of that. Okay, anything else?
Yes. So I have more questions that I'd like to get to that were entered in advance, but I just had one sent in that's sort of the opposite spectrum here. We had the question about how to address things or what to think about postmenopausal. The question here now is, what are some of the top things you would recommend to somebody in their 20s? And similarly, there's another question that was entered in advance, which was to retinoids that you just discussed. How early would you recommend somebody looking at retinol? So what products would you recommend to somebody in their 20s? And in specific, as you look at retinoids, how does that help?
Okay, so first of all, generally, if I ask somebody in their 20s if there's something they want to change or improve about their skin, what would it be? It's going to be, in many cases, it's going to be I still break out. Or maybe I didn't, have much acne as a teenager, but I'm breaking out now, and it's usually, a lot of it is in the chin, perioral, jawline. So we would address that. We have a product that's called Duality, which can prevent breakouts and help you to achieve complete total clearing. And I know because I'm a 2-time Accutane failure, and my skin is absolutely perfectly clear, and I never break out. But really, at the 20s, it's about prevention. Most of the damage that you're going to see in your lifetime has been programmed into your skin. One of the things that retinoids can do, as an example, along with the system, is retinoids can actually change gene expression. They can actually thicken the dermis up to twice as much. They can actually reverse so much of the damage that's been programmed into your DNA. So this is something, the good news about what we're talking about is it's very individualized. It's all about what it is specifically that you want to change or improve. In terms of retinoids, there's really no age There's no, in other words, it's not like something where you say, well, you have to be over the age of 10 or something like that to use retinoids. There are even situations where they use retinoids on infants. Teenagers use retinoids. The good news is whether you're using a retinoid for redness associated with acne, whether you're using a retinoid for redness associated with rosacea or acne, or whether you're using it for aging, that it can be used at any age. And also, and again, we don't have time to go into this a lot, but what I can tell you is that when in developing our retinoids, literally 78% of patients have no side effects. So we can achieve remarkable results and with very little acclimation. One of the questions that came in advance talks about things like crow's feet and how to rejuvenate the eye area. So that's a great question. So crow's feet, I love the description crow's feet, those awful lines on the, the outside of the eye area. So there are actually two different types of lines and wrinkles. One, lines and wrinkles from sun exposure, and that's the majority of the things that we see. And from sun exposure, a lot of those lines and wrinkles have to do with the actual eye area itself, where it gets crepey or it goes down into this area. And then the second is dynamic muscle movement. Now, dynamic muscle movement is different. If you lived in a cave, you never had any sun exposure, dynamic muscle movement has to do with expressions. And typically, it is a crease in the muscle where certain muscles are overused. That can be the forehead lines, that can be the parentheses lines between the eyes, crow's feet here. Those are the most common ones. And so it's a crease in the muscle. Now, I can soften that, but you need to know that's where Botox comes in. You could even go and have that area lasered within an inch of your life. It'll look good for a little while and they'll come right back because it has to do with dynamic muscle movement. So I'm not suggesting that everybody runs out and they have to get Botox, but you need to understand realistically that that's where Botox comes in. Okay? Stuart, back to you.
Yeah. And let me I would just want to share, I shared this at the very beginning, but to share a quick image to what was spoken to. This is somebody that we had shown at the beginning, speaking to the crow's feet. So this is using the skincare management system, which you were speaking to prior, Jan, and system has been awarded New Beauty Magazine's best system 10 years in a row because of everything that was described. But the system and Retinol Plus would be an example here of what was used to soften those lines around the eye. So thank you for the question.
So I have had people say that they've been told that they look like they use Botox, but it's not going to completely remove it in the same way that Botox would.
Same here, and I think this goes along with it, but there are questions to under eye bags and or crepey skin around the eyes. So what are some technologies or products that could help address with that? Okay,
well, first of all, my number one favorite is Luminate eye gel. And let me just kind of talk about the sort of the structure around the eye area really quick so you understand this. So your eye rests on a fat pad all the way around. And that fat pad is held in place with collagen, it's held in place with a membrane, and so it keeps it sort of nice and contoured. And as the collagen begins to weaken, as that membrane sort of loses some of its elasticity, the fat pad herniates out. And that's what you see is a bag, and fat retains water. So lots of times what happens is you get up in the morning and you've got puffy eyes, and as the day goes on and you have less water retention, it dissipates, but pretty soon it's going to be that way all the time. And also there can be what's called trowel defects, where the fat is not evenly situated, so you see like grooves and things like that. Now, what I'm going to tell you can minimize that. It can make it look a lot better. But that's where cosmetic surgery comes in terms of removing the fat pad or working on the contours of that area. So Luminate eye gel, I'll tell you why I like it. Here's some of the things that happen as you age. Luminate eye gel was actually originally, I developed it for dark circles. And I used to say to people when they'd say, what do I do for my dark circles? I'd say, pick your parents. But even if you don't have dark circles, as you get older and that area there thins, you have more blood vessels show, so you don't have that same luminous clarity. So number one, what this does is it helps to clear away the bilirubin and bilirubin, the colorations that come from blood, and the blood vessels being closer to the surface about 300 times faster. So you notice a definite difference in clarity in that eye area. Plus it has retinol and has a number of other topical agents. So it makes a huge difference around the eye area in that crepiness and the fine lines, and making it look more contoured. And it just makes the eye area look a lot younger, a lot brighter, and a lot smoother. And you use that right along with the skincare management system.
So thank you. So we have a couple of questions here that I'm going to group all together. So there are questions about elasticity, wrinkles, tightening without surgery, uneven texture, how do you soften nasolabial lines. The summary that I want to pull that together with and ask you as a question is, if you're speaking to somebody whose primary concern is wrinkles or is textural concerns, what would be your recommendations, and what would you say to them?
Skincare management system and using a retinoid. Again, it can make a huge difference. And when you look at these before and after pictures and you see somebody at 3 months or 6 months, that's really a starting point. I mean, in terms of retinoids, and again, not all retinoids are equal, but in terms of retinoids, they've actually done studies on twins where they've taken twin girl who uses, just a regular skincare problem, takes care of her skin, uses sunscreen, takes her sister, and she's using a skincare and she's using a retinoid, and 10 years later, one sister looks 10 years younger than the other. So we can make an extraordinary difference in transforming the appearance of skin with the right topical agents. So that would be one thing, Stuart.
And to just to share a quick image with this for y'all, for anybody who came in later in the call very quickly here. This is both of these individuals. This is using the skincare management system as you just described, and using Retinol Plus. And Retinol Plus is a retinoid product that we have as a company, but to speaking to the texture, the fine lines, and even softening of those nasolabial folds. Looking here, Hyla, and so this is a question, Hyla versus Transformation Face Cream. Can you speak to a moment of a hyaluronic acid versus a moisturizer? And you spoke a bit to what a moisturizer was, but can you give a little information there?
Yes, so Hyla in no way replaces Transformation. It's something that you would add in addition. It has to do with volume. And so this is another complex. I'm in my mind right now, I'm trying to think of how to simplify this down the best way that I can. So if you look at how the face ages, as much as 50% of what we perceive as the aging process is loss of volume. And let me just show you something really quick. I had this sitting on my desk. This is not a pre-planned question, but this is what's known as the Youthful Triangle. And the highest point of the face is the cheekbones, and it narrows down into a well-defined jawline. Now what happens as the face ages and you lose volume, and volume has to do with the hyaluronic acid, mucopolysaccharides, all of that, but it's primarily hyaluronic acid. What happens is the cheek pads move down, you start to see a nasolabial fold, this becomes the widest point of the face, and the female face actually starts to look more masculinized. So, Hyla 3D was actually developed to assist in addressing that. So one of the reasons why people get injectable hyaluronic acid is because what it does is it addresses fine lines and wrinkles. It adds volume to the face, and you can keep lifting the face and having facelifts, and it starts to look skeletal. So that three-dimensional volume is really important. So let me talk for just a moment about hyaluronic acid. Hyaluronic acid holds 1 to 10,000 times its weight in water, and it was actually developed in ophthalmology. And it started being used back in 1972. They'd put it in the eyes, and it absorbed a lot of water, and it would actually help to give the eyeball pliability and stretch it around when they're doing surgery. And because it absorbs so much weight in water, they started using it in skincare because that makes a lot of sense. Great moisturizer. And to the best of my knowledge, first product was around 1989, and it was Estee Lauder had the first one. Now it's a very large molecule. So obviously it's different than injectable. Most people don't understand how injectables work. When you inject hyaluronic acid into the face, it's not the hyaluronic acid that gives you the correction. Hyaluronic acid acts as a platform or as a scaffolding for collagen to form. Collagen forms around it. And how long it's going to last is dependent on where it's injected, because if it's someplace where there's lots of movement, it breaks down faster, and also how cross-linked it is. So for example, there's something called voluma in the cheek area, and it could last a year or two because there's not a lot of movement and it's highly cross-linked. Lip area lasts a lot less than those areas. So what we've done is we have a game-changing hyaluronic acid product. This is a much smaller molecule, tiny little molecules that actually can get into the skin. In fact, one of them, just one of them, is 50 times more moisturizing than another hyaluronic acid molecule. Not only that, but at 24 hours, you still have 5 times as much. So the idea is that if you have this, using this day and night in the skin, and it's sitting there, it helps to form a platform for collagen and assists with 3D volumization. Now again, doesn't replace cosmetic surgery, doesn't replace injectables, but it's another little piece that can help to give the skin and help with that loss of volume and helping to provide greater softness and contour to the appearance of skin.
Great, thank you. And
Okay.
and again, that was
That's a
to
long
highlight.
one.
No, wonderful description. And that was for Hyla 3D is the product.
Yes,
Is the
and by the
hyaluronic
way,
acid product.
I want to mention something. This product, you could have really oily skin, you put it on, it just disappears and you love it because you don't feel it. And if you have drier skin, you put it on, it disappears. So it doesn't replace any of the other products, but you don't feel like you're wearing something extra.
And that actually is a comment here that I want to read. And I don't think I'm going to continue, and if you're okay with going on for a number more minutes here, Jan, I
absolutely
definitely will. There's a comment here with a why, and I think the ultimate answer of the why is truly the selection of the total formulation to deliver the goal. But one of our a professional here, their clients have asked many times why your products go so directly into the skin when others feel like they sit on top of it, and how to answer that. So just that idea that it's formulated to have the feel is...
Well, I told you in the beginning, I'm selfish. I don't want a product that just feels like it's sitting on the surface of the skin. Now, that gets into, somebody's going to extrapolate from that and say, oh, well, then your products penetrate better. Penetration is a very complex issue, and it's something that is constantly being looked at because, frankly, for many technologies, it's about connecting with receptor sites on cells, and you have cells on the surface of your skin. So even if you have something that you're trying to get penetrating into the dermis or whatever, because everybody thinks that's what you need to do, you may bypass your target site. There's so many things that I can do and influence and address and create simply by connecting with receptor sites, and something that is designed to influence those receptor sites. But regardless, you want a product that feels good, and I try to design products that feel really good on the skin. And one of the comments we get with the system is people always say, I went through the products, and when I got done, I felt like I was only wearing one product.
I'll say that's one of the things I personally love about it. So I have 2 questions here, and we spoke to acne on Monday, and we don't have the time to delve into it deeply, but there's one individual here who has stated she's been using Bioclear, Bioglycolic Cleanser, Bioclear, and the Antioxidant Daily Face Protectant. This is an African-American female, skin tone similar to Kerry Washington. And what she's noticed is when she gets acne, that acne scar, the acne mark, the post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, called here acne scarring, and that's where I want to give a little description, takes a long time to fade. So are there, and I'll fold this into one other question, are there products that you would recommend to help reduce that acne and move along the fading process faster, especially for darker skin tones? And similarly, another individual who lives in a Caribbean sunny, humid climate and tends to have more acne breakouts as their, I presume, in the warmer period. So recommendations.
So first of all, and another complex subject, but I'm gonna try to make it
to simplify down.
First of all, the term acne is a term that describes a process. So sometimes people say, I don't have acne, I just break out once in a while. It doesn't matter if you break out once a year, once a month, once a week, it is an acne lesion. And when you have a breakout, that's the end of the process. If you don't want to have acne, you need to prevent the breakout. And that means if you have a tendency to acne, by the way, there's no cure for acne, but you can have complete, total clearing like I do. So what you want to do is you want to prevent it. If you have a tendency to break out every month or every week, or to have a few breakouts here and there, you want to prevent it. So if you don't break out, you don't have the post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. But we can get rid of that a lot faster. And what that has to do with is acne is an inflammatory disorder, and that inflammation, as it makes its way to the surface, releases certain excipients or certain factors that are in your blood, and bilirubin, bilirubin, that coloration, it stains the skin. And the more pigment you have in your skin, the more brownish, purplish it is, and the longer it takes to go away. So if you had really fair skin, it would probably be mainly redness. And again, we can get rid of that faster, but you need to prevent it. The way to prevent it is to use duality. And duality is extraordinary because what it does is it prevents the breakout. At the same time, it is also a de-aging product. I could put somebody on duality that doesn't have any acne, and their skin is going to look noticeably, significantly, dramatically smoother, better, more refined, more uniform. But it's a dual chamber product, and it also treats acne, and it's not drying.
Wonderful, thank you. We had a question that came in, I think, when we were speaking to retinoids on the in use, and the question was just which retinoid, which accelerator, and to clarify that for people, that would be Age Intervention Retinol Plus. There's an individual here, and the question is the difference between Luminate face cream and Retinol Plus. And so I'll describe this for everyone a little bit. Both of these are a focus on retinoid. To which person, if they're given what somebody's primary concern is, which would you recommend for those products? And definitely they can be used together, but what is the intended difference between the two?
So retinol is, first of all, I think they should put it in the water because it's just the gold standard. But Luminate is retinol, and it's also addressing discoloration, skin uniformity, melasma, solar licheniasis or brown spots, all of that discoloration. So one of the things I want to say is that statistically, every single human being on the face of the earth by the age of 35 will have abnormal pigment. And even if you don't have what looks like obvious spots on the surface of your skin, you will have what's called background pigment. Look at a picture of somebody when they're 30, 35, 40. Look at a picture when they were 20. The skin doesn't have that same crisp clarity. So it can get muddy, or it gets background pigment. So Luminate is something that's absolutely extraordinary, and I do mean extraordinary for that. And this is a product that has actually, the study was published in the Journal of Drugs and Dermatology, a peer-reviewed medical journal, half-face comparison with prescription hydroquinone, and actually outperformed prescription hydroquinone. And this has some very new, very unique technology in it. And we don't have time to get into it in full detail, but it also has the retinol. So you're able to address that, plus and address many of the factors associated with aging. The fact that you have this discoloration is not only has to do with the environment, ethnicity, a lot of other different factors, hormones, but it also has to do with how your skin functions as you age. And the more that you're able to address those kinds of issues, overall, the more that you're able to get really uniform, younger looking skin. Okay?
Great, thank you. What are your thoughts on toners, and do you recommend them?
Well, toners really are actually unnecessary. Now, for example, if you had a toner that was, say, a glycolic acid toner, it's really not a toner. If somebody said, put that on your skin and leave it, you're using a glycolic acid lotion, really. It's just in a very watery form. Toners and astringents, a toner is usually witch hazel or some other ingredients or something that is supposedly supposed to remove whatever's left behind after cleansing. An astringent is something that has typically alcohol or some other ingredient. It's a little bit more aggressive. Again, designed to typically remove whatever is left behind. If you're using a cleanser that really cleans the skin, and also, again, this is the glycolic acid cleanser, the molecule actually gets into the follicle, and it also dissolves and dislodges that glue-like substance in the follicle as well as on the surface of the skin between cells. If you're putting a toner on and getting something off, it's typically something that has oxidated. It is not dirt. It is not oil. Your skin is going to be absolutely perfectly clean. And a lot of derms don't believe in toners. There's not really any medical validation or reason specifically to use a toner.
Thank you. There's a question here. What's the difference between Bioclear lotion and Bioclear cream?
There's really no difference. One is more emollient than the other. So for example, one of the questions when I'm doing a consultation that I might ask somebody is, what type of skin do you think you have? And somebody might say, well, my skin is really dry, or my skin is really oily, or it's a combination. So their program is going to be, everybody's still going to use Bioclear, they're still going to use lipid-soluble C, they're still going to use hydration, they're still going to use a sunscreen, the cleanser. It's a matter of how much emolliency. Are we adding emolliency? Are we kind of keeping it neutral? Are we also controlling oil? But the technologies are the same, because I don't care, you can have the oiliest skin in the world, not have acne, but you're still going to age. And that aging, most of that aging that we're going to see in our lifetime happened years and years and years ago. So it's the same for everyone.
Perfect. And a couple of different questions here, but it boils down into a summary. Would you recommend duality to be used with somebody who is having breakouts and things associated with mask use?
Absolutely. Again, if you have a tendency to acne, sometimes acne can kind of go dormant, but it doesn't mean that it won't flare up. And when you're using a mask, masks can create enough of sometimes irritation, or something that exacerbates what is going on with the skin. Now, one thing I want to mention, and this doesn't happen that often, but it's possible with mask usage that somebody can actually have something that looks exactly like acne. You probably couldn't distinguish between the two, but it is a buildup of yeast in the follicle. That is treated differently. You need to go to a derm. They do a very simple skin scraping. It's not painful. It doesn't hurt at all. Your skin doesn't get red. It's just taking off some dead cells. They can look at it under a microscope and determine right away. And for something like that, you would use an antifungal product. And it's typically over the counter. It'd be like Nizoral shampoo, which is ketoconazole. Sometimes it has to be a stronger version of that. It needs to be prescription. But in general, it's acne. It's all acne, and you want to prevent it, as we've been talking about.
Okay, so one here, there's a question or a statement here. Vitamin C breaks out my skin. It's likely the acidity, and that, just to clarify what you've described earlier, L-ascorbic acid has to be very low acidity, very low pH, or a high acidity in order to work.
Yes.
Our vitamin C does not require that. So
L-ascorbic acid, in order to work, and the original patents has to be at a pH of 2.5 or lower. About 50% of the population reacts to that. So lipid-soluble C is at a higher pH. It doesn't burn, it doesn't sting. It can also be used concurrently at the same time with glycolic acid, same time as retinoids. It's an anti-inflammatory. And again, I could go on, but I think that probably covers that.
Okay, there's somebody whose question here sounds to be a little bit more toward an acclimation question, because they're saying they've noticed it with using some of our products as well as using other products, which is that they notice they start using something, skin feels great for about 2 weeks, and then they start to notice changes on their skin, whether it be feeling different or noticing a difference in pores feeling larger. Can you speak to anything on acclimation or changes that people may notice if they're starting to use
it's kind of difficult because I'd have to know more specifics on that individual. So sometimes what happens is people get the system, they don't look at the directions, they don't read that Bioclear is used once a day only for the first week, and then AM and PM after that, and that if you're adding something like a retinoid or Luminate into your program, that you start gradually. The majority of people never ever have an issue, but I always take a very conservative approach. And also, sometimes people will say, yeah, this happened with the system or that, and when you question them, they're not really using the system, and they're not using products that are going to fully address their issues. So when those issues continue to appear, then sometimes the assumption is it's something with the system. So I have to have more information, but in general, we don't really see, we rarely see that.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. There's a question to, there's a comment basically. Somebody is asking if they have a dermatitis or reactions to products, and that one too is kind of one without knowing more. It's very difficult to know what your individual concerns will be.
Let me say this. What makes me crazy, and maybe this has happened to you, but you know, you might be standing in a department store and you're standing at the Estee Lauder counter or something, and somebody is in front of you and they're bringing a product back and they're saying, you know, this caused me to, I was allergic to it. And the person behind the counter says, really? I've never seen that happen, ever. We've never had an allergic reaction. There's no such thing as never, because it doesn't matter how great your product is or how carefully formulated it is or what you do in terms of toxicity studies or anything. Somebody is going to be sensitive to something. And sometimes you can be sensitive to an ingredient in one product and not be sensitive in another. It could be percentage, or it could be the fact of how it's some other delivery agent or something that maybe makes the skin more sensitized. So in general, what I can tell you, and we keep records, we have a technical support department, and we keep records on every single phone call, every single incident that happens, whether it's redness, whether it's any of those things. And I can just tell you that it's very, very low, and everything is also tested ahead of time for all of that. Stuart.
So 2 last questions here. And actually you may be able to pull a couple of these 2 together. I'll ask both of them. There's some question around the multi-acid resurfacing pads and summer use. But the other question is there anything you recommend if somebody is concerned with sebaceous hyperplasia? Okay,
let me answer sebaceous hyperplasia first. Sebaceous hyperplasia is something that typically can start, usually not before the 30s. The tendency toward it might be hereditary. Sometimes it is exacerbated by sun exposure, but what it is, it's literally where the oil gland pushes out, so it's not acne. And sebaceous hyperplasia generally has to be removed in some way. And it depends on the skin type, it depends on the doctor, and that's between the dermatologist and that individual. And some people have a much greater tendency toward them, and they're very, very annoying. Now, you can do things to help to diminish sebaceous hyperplasia, and you can do things to help to keep them from returning. And again, that would be the acids, the skincare management system, all of that. Now, to the multi-acid resurfacing pads. I'm smiling because this is one of my favorite products. This is a fairly new product. So what that is, and again, I didn't plan this, I just happen to have these sitting on my desk today, but this is a jar that has 30 pre-soaked pads in here. There's 4 different acids, so they work at kind of different levels in the skin. but I love it for a couple of reasons. One, it's very, very simple. So you just wash your face, you wipe the pad on, you leave it on for 10 minutes, rinse it off, and then put the rest of your products on. But you notice a difference immediately. It's instant gratification. You notice that your follicles look smaller. You notice your skin looks more glowing. You notice that the skin, it just looks plumper, it looks fresher, it just looks more uniform. And as you use this progressively over time, it gets better and better and better. So if you're dealing with acne, if you're dealing with all various signs of aging and discoloration and fine lines and all of that, and if you're dealing with rosacea, any of those things, along with your program, it just enhances it and it gets progressively better. And I want to mention something about a term that I use, resurfacing. I'm a huge believer in resurfacing because, again, we want this really nice thin stratum corneum, but the more you resurface the skin, the faster the skin responds and the more that you tend to produce substances in the skin like collagen and those kinds of things. And I always say that you want to, it's like going out over a cliff. You want to get right to the edge of that cliff. You don't want to step off because you don't want to irritate your skin, but you want to have your skin functioning at a level in which you are stimulating all of these various kinds of factors to give the skin the healthiest, youngest looking, smoothest, most reflective skin you can. But along the way, this also has this really specific benefit for all these other conditions like acne and discoloration and all of that.
Great. I'm going to just answer a quick question here as it's asking a direct product recommendation. And then I'll finish on a last statement here that somebody just posted. So the question is, what's the best product for hand rejuvenation? And our recommendation for hand would be Marini Renew. And that one is a peer review published, studied product for rejuvenation on the hands. Phenomenal solution with tons of the technologies and concepts that have been discussed. For neck rejuvenation, and this also was the first ever published study on the neck, the recommendation is Marini Juveneck. Mm-hmm. The last statement here that I want to, and actually somebody just posted, thank you, they love using retinol mask on the backs of the hands as well. Mm-hmm. The last statement I'll read here for you, and then I thank you for your time. Somebody's saying they usually see pores increase with age. This is a professional. Okay. But using the system, no, this is just a statement. Using the system, Jan Marini, of course, minimizes even the largest pores. I've seen this time and time again. My advice is to always make sure the patient is faithful to the entire system, do the treatment twice a day, and explain to everyone how little time in their day it takes to apply the system. So that's just a statement and a thank you for introduction of that statement.
I want to mention one thing about that because I just want people to understand about pores. There's a couple of things that affect pore size. One is the fact that that your pores have collagen around them, okay? About 80% collagen, and it acts like Spanx, like a girdle, keeps those pores nice and tight. And as your Spanx and your collagen begins to go away, then what happens is the pores get flabby. Second thing is retentive material. So if you can stimulate collagen, if you can get rid of the retentive material, they're not trap doors. You can't open and close them, but you can make them look like they're gone. And let me tell you, you really, really can. So yeah, thank you for that.
Wonderful. Well, Jan, thank you very much. I truly appreciate you taking the time and the extra time here as well to answer as many of everybody's questions as we could.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I know if it weren't for people like you, we wouldn't be here. So I really appreciate it. Bye, everybody. I'm going to go.
All right. Thank you to everyone. Appreciate you taking the time. Have a wonderful day.